Hello, Turkaholics. Thank you for listening to Football a la Turca. This is Season 2, Episode 2, covering Matchday 2 of the Turkish Super League 2019-2020 season. This episode is recorded on Tuesday, August 27th, 2019. I am your host, Kaan Bayazit, and I'm joined by my usual co-hosts, Umut, Naderi, and of course, the triumphantly returning Burak, Sezgin. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Hello again.
Hello, Turkaholics. I believe that's what we're calling our listeners now. Is that right, Carl?
Yeah, I mean...
The fantastic Turkaholics. I've been having fun interacting with you all on Twitter and Reddit, and some of you on Discord as well. So we'll be putting up some links on how you can join in the conversation.
Yeah, I love how you're interacting with people too on in our DMs, and you fail to tell me about it. So there's a new little segment we have this week, which is called Rectifications, because you don't give me feedback on your little advances with our Turkaholics.
Indeed, I've been having a few conversations with our listeners on DM, so thank you for DMing us. We always appreciate and value your feedback. Of course, we do this show for you and the listeners. So, Khan, next time we have a DM from a listener, I will, of course, call you right away and let you know.
Oh, yeah, please do. Umut, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You're about to move to the UK in a couple of weeks or so.
Well, I'm a little bit excited and also a bit nervous because of the change I'm about to experience, because it's the first time that I'm moving outside of Turkey for such a long time period. So let's see how it goes.
You just have to imagine how it was for people like 10, 15 years ago, when you could still get lots of pirated games in Turkey, for the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 and stuff like that, or Xbox or whatever you were playing. Imagine then having to go to the UK and not having those wildly available and having to pay £60 or something for a game. So, it could always be worse.
Yeah.
So I already alluded to this new little segment we have, which is called Rectifications. That's for if you catch us making any mistake in one of our previous episodes, you can always DM us on Twitter, or you can just message us, or wherever you want, how you want to get your message across if we made a mistake. And I think most of these are probably mine. So there's a couple I did forget to mention in the last episode. It might have been from 2 episodes ago already, but I'll quickly start here. So, rectification number 1. Denizlispor actually won the Birinci League last season, not Gençlerbirliği, so I do apologize for that, Denizlispor fans. That was my bad. Second rectification, Başakşehir are straight into the group stages of the Europa League, but we already covered that briefly. But that was also a mistake on my part again. I did not realized they were straight into the Europa League group stages, because it just did not make any logical sense to me, as there was still a round of qualifiers to be played. But I figured it out after I realized Porto were in the group stages straight away too. And then the third of these 3 rectifications that I have down here, but Burak, if you remember another one, feel free to jump in. But this is on the Sturridge transfer last week. We spoke about his annual wage, which is $1.5 million, but of course we also spoke about his signing bonus, and then we said, well, basically that boils down to $2.5 million a year for his 2 guaranteed years of contract. But Burak noticed something in the legal speak of the cap announcement, where it specified that Trabzonspor actually will pay Sturridge a signing bonus this year, but also next year. So that's $2 million signing bonus this year and next year. So basically, he's earning $3.5 million a year, and then in the optional year, it's a potential other $3.5 million. I assume there's going to be another signing bonus involved there. I'm not sure if that was specified, Burak, in the language.
Can't remember that. The main thing I remember is the wage and the signing bonus that he's going to receive each year. So he's making a tidy profit on what he used to earn at Liverpool. Of course, the wage, the tax is around about 40-45% in the UK on those high earners, and it's only around 15% in Turkey. So he's pretty much just about doubled his salary.
Did he really earn that little at Liverpool? Because, I mean, Premier League players tend to be very highly paid. I know Cenk Tosun is making like £5 million. Obviously, that's not net, but still, that's a lot of money.
I think Sturridge was... I need to double check, but I think his take home after tax was around about £35,000 a week. And I think that's pounds, and in euros at Trabzon, I think he's on around about the 60,000 mark. So he's a nice little increase in pay to go and play in Trabzon, and let's hope it works out better for him than it did for Kevin Campbell.
Okay, and a shout out to one of our Patreons, Brad Kyle Warden. We will be discussing Paso League probably during this upcoming break as one of our, so to speak, filler episodes. So that's one of the requests of him, but I definitely want to have Uzar on. I think I want to get his thoughts on the matter, but I think we're all generally of the same opinion. But of course, Umut has most experience with it, so he'll be able to tell us a little bit more about Paso League 2. Burak, you found a very interesting thread on Paso League, so we'll be talking about that as well, which will be very useful for foreigners trying to go in and watch a Super League game, or a cup game, or even a European game, because I think you need Paso League for that too these days. So anyway, we'll be discussing Paso League in the upcoming future. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's get started with the Europa League results, because of course Trabzonspor last week played their first of their two-leg qualifiers against AEK Athens. And Trabzonspor did very well for themselves because they got an away victory, 1-3, and Marco Livaya was the guy who's got the scoring started here. He put AEK Athens 1-0 up after just 4 minutes, and Marco Livaya, of course, our guest on the preview, Stavros Markoulakis, highlighted him as the star of AEK's team, and he got on the score sheet straight away. It didn't look too good for Trabzon early on. They got a penalty. Jose Sosa stepped up, hit the bar, missed it, and then of course you're thinking, well, that's not going to end well here for Trabzonspor, but Trabzonspor kept playing confidently and dominated possession and played a decent match, but all three of their goals were very similar in the sense that I think all three they came off a corner kick, not maybe directly. The goal scorer was always the same as well. Midfielder Caleb Ikuban got a hat-trick in this match in the 26th, 44th and 70th minute. And that gives Trabzonspor obviously an amazing advantage heading into Thursday's second leg at the Akyazi Stadium. Guys, were you surprised by how easily Trabzonspor saw off their Greek opposition?
I was. I thought it might be a little bit tougher for them playing away from home. But I think it just shows you the quality that Trabzon have in their team, especially in their attacking prowess. I did tip them to go through to the group stages, and I think that is going to come true, which will be good because it will be good for the coefficient points for Turkey. So I'm hoping for a successful campaign from the teams this year to keep those points high for us, and I think it will be just business as usual when they bring it back to Trabzon to finish it off. I don't foresee any slip-ups from them.
No, I don't think so either. Umut, what do you think? Trabzon got this in the bag, or could there still be a surprise in store on Thursday?
At first, correction, third goal came from an open play assisted by Abdülkadir Ömür and a clean finish from Caleb Ekuban. I watched the game, the whole game live, and I can say their play is really good and effective on the opponent's half of the pitch, and they play real fast, and the passing game is so good and really promising for the upcoming games.
Yeah, I see a lot of resemblances with Fenerbahçe, for example. I think the main issue for Trabzonspor is defensively. They do seem to allow quite a few chances in their games. I mean, we saw it again this weekend, but of course, no spoilers now, but last week too against Kasım Pasha, and Trabzonspor going forward looked very good, similar to Fenerbahçe, but they still need to work on that defense. That's why I was kind of surprised that they let Edgarier go on loan to Feyenoord, without even giving him a try. because I think that could have been a decent addition to their team, but I'm not sure what their status is when it comes to foreigners in the squad, so maybe that had something to do with it. But hopefully he has a good season in Holland and comes back and Trabzonspor give him a shot, because I think it would be a fine addition for them. Anyway, let's head over to the Super League, because what we're here to talk about, of course, the match day 2 results of the Turkish Super League, and we'll start off on Friday where Beşiktaş bounced back from their 3-0 defeat last week against Sivasspor and got a 3-0 win of their own over Göztepe at the Vodafone Park. Goals here coming from Güven Yalçın in the 45th minute, Caner Erkin in the 54th, and Adem Ljajic in the 59th. So Beşiktaş getting the job done within the hour, so to speak. Things of note in this match was the debut of Josh Kevin Nkudu. Made a good impression, looked very, very fast, and not necessarily too poor on the ball. Very good dribbling skills, it seemed like. He got about 20 minutes or so and seemed very stoked to get on the pitch. Looked impressed by the home crowd and seemed to be invigorated by them getting behind him every time he got the ball. So that was fun to see. Göztepe, I think you got a couple of notes on that, Umut. They didn't look too good in attack again. I mean, I kind of had that moment you had last week with Erenderdiok, where I think, I don't know, let's say the 55th minute or something, or in the first half maybe, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was well into the game. Suddenly he was involved in an aerial or something. I'm pretty sure he lost it. And I'm like, oh, is he on the pitch? So I know you got a couple of things to say about Göztepe's prowess looking going forward.
Well, as I said in the first week, Göztepe started really bad. Their creativity on the attacking side is almost none. So they always look so slow during the attacking phase, and which gives the defending sides, which was Beşiktaş this week, proper time to line up and close the gaps before the threat happens. And with these two fast and pacey wingers they have, Serdar Gürler and Halil Akbunar, you would expect them to use them as a threat from sides, but they fail to do that. So, and Erenderdiok is a experienced player, but was ineffective during these two games. And the first goal came from his error of judgment of the header he missed, and Beşiktaş player Güven Yalçın scored the first goal, and the others came in after it.
Yeah, and he was taken off at halftime, and Halil Akbunar was put in, and I think he created pretty much all the danger that Göztepe had in this match, which wasn't of any particular note, but Halil Akbunar was the player that looked most threatening when it came to Göztepe. Burak, any surprise for you that Beşiktaş bounced back with a 3-0 win here?
I didn't expect a hiccup at home. I don't think that Beşiktaş played particularly well, but I just think Göztepe were awful, especially Beto. I thought he had a really poor game. The second goal from Caner, he should have done a lot better. I know it came through a crowd of people, but the goalkeeper should have done a lot better. And the third goal from Ljajic, he just let it slip in under himself. I think Göztepe were lucky not to go down to 10 men. I think Poko should have got a second yellow for the stamp on Oğuzhan's foot. And that was right in front of the ref, so I don't know how he didn't see that. And no Cameron Jerome on the bench, so I don't know what he's up to these days. So we can, we just have to say hashtag Cameron Jerome effect. But Göztepe didn't look like they were going to cause any trouble. And like I say, I think the 3 goals that Beşiktaş got were just through really bad defending from Göztepe. I know you hit the bar twice before you open your account, but I think there's still some work for Abdullah Hafez to do there.
Yeah, and they hit the bar twice in the first half, like you said, before they scored, but that was really both attempts from outside of the box because Beşiktaş were struggling. And I think the main issue there was their midfield. Gary Medel was not very involved in the build-up. That improved in the second half. Gary Medel came into the ball a lot more, was clearly instructed to play the ball forward straight away, come into the ball more, and you could instantly see that midfield started to churn and that Beşiktaş started to work more. And a very interesting thing that was also spotted by analysts, and Umut saw it straight away too. I noticed it too, but Umut, please explain to us what Caner's role as a false left back was for Beşiktaş. It was very interesting to see.
Like as you say, the midfield was ineffective during the first half, but during the second half, we saw Caner coming to the central area more than he ever did. He was roaming around just like a regista down there, even though he was a left back in the formation. I think this made a really good impact on Beşiktaş's playmaking side, that he came over to take more responsibility to build up play from the back instead of the center backs. Also, he roamed around in the central area, created a possibility for Adem Liège to make some forward runs as the area was filled by Caner Erkin in the midfield. And the third goal came likewise as Adem Liège made a forward run and scored a great solo goal from cutting in from left side.
Yeah, and I'm curious if that's something that Beşiktaş will continue to use, that false left back, this regardless of whether it's Caner Erkin or Pedro Rebocho who plays in that position. But it's going to be interesting to see once Beşiktaş brings in a new defensive midfielder, because we'll have some news later about that, about Gary Medel, about the new defensive midfielder coming in, stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see if they have a midfielder that's more capable of playing in a more deep laying playmaker role, or more of a role like Atiba had, where he was just distributing the ball, but not necessarily as a playmaker, but just helping the transition from defense to attack. If we'll still see Caner or Rebocho in that false left back role, I'm not sure if we will see that, but that's clearly something that has been practiced for Beşiktaş, and is one of the first big signs of really Avcii's hand coming back. It's something I haven't really seen too often, a false left or right back, so that was interesting to see. But let's move over to Saturday. If you want to get deeper analysis on the Beşiktaş game, go to the Black Eagles podcast. Saturday, Ankaragücü and Kayserispor played to a 1-1 draw on Saturday. Dever Urgil getting the scoring started here for Ankaragücü, opening up his account in the 59th minute. But Umut Bulut with a last grasp equalizer for Kayserispor salvages a point in added time against his former club. Ankaragücü, they for the second week in a row, I thought they looked decent because a lot of woes for Ankaragücü, transfer ban, no new players, only managed to sign Kitsio on a permanent deal. That somehow managed to get through. I guess that was like an optional thing or something, so that got allowed by the TFF. Burak, any surprises here for you, Ankaragücü, Kayseri? If you would have been asked beforehand to make a prediction for a betting coupon, what would you have said?
I would have gone with Ankaragücü. I would have gone for them to win. And Kayseri, last minute, Umut Bulut, the timeless Umut Bulut pops up again. The guy that looks like Serdar Ortaç but doesn't play football like him. So, like I say, popped up at the right time with a goal. I thought Ankaragücü if they had their finishing boots on, they could have won it. Bad miss by Aydın in the first half, and then at 1-0 Orgil had a bit of a tough chance where he turned left foot, put it just wide of the post. I thought he could have finished that. So maybe he's not fresh. Maybe he's just not that good, or maybe he just needs a few run of matches to get his shooting boot back on. And also for the Orgil goal, we have had VAR in Turkey. This is the second season. Why can't we get goal line technology? Because that goal, it was over the line. We could see it in the replays, but it was given by the linesman. And I'm just thinking, we've got goal line technology in the English Premiership. We've had it for a few seasons now. How hard would it be to introduce into Turkey so that there is no shades of grey for that? So that's something that I think might be a topic for discussion. But Kai said it, I just think they're a little bit bad with their finishing. And there was an Ankaragücü goal that was given off for offside, which was correct as the player that played it on was in the offside position. So that was a good call, correct call. But I would have put Ankara in, and like you say, the classic orange bullet popping up at the end to give Kayseri a point. Not well deserved, in my opinion.
Yeah, and not much left to be said. I think, Umut, do you have any more points to make about this game?
Well, at the very early stages of the game, I saw Aydin Karabulut missing two really big opportunities early on that you would expect him to score with ease, but he just kicked the ball directly into Sylvia Lung's hands instead of a 7-meter goal.
I think he took a touch too many on that first one. That was like a sitter.
He didn't look so composed and indecisive where to hit the ball, and this really costed them 3 points.
And Ankara now left on 2 points, of course, after that draw. So not a disastrous start for them, but I think many fans of Ankara expected the worst start, but there could have been more. I mean, the penalty shot last week. This week, there were some penalty shots, but I didn't feel like there was one that you could have definitely given. But let's move over to Alanyaspor Kasim Pasha. That was a goal-scoring fest. Alanyaspor here with their second win in a row. 4-1 trashing of Kasim Pasha. Their new signing, the Greek Anastasios Bakasetas, got on the scoring sheet in the 29th minute, but Mehmet Tiam had equalized just 4 minutes later for Kasim Pasha. Papi Cisse then scored in the 54th minute to make it 2-1. Junior Fernandes scored 6 minutes later to make it 3-1. And Yassine Bamou got on the score sheet towards the end to make it 4-1. Papi Cisse also had a goal disallowed in the first half. Yeah, Alanyaspor continued to impress under new leadership, but they just picked back up where they left off last season under Sergen Yalcin, and Erol Bulut just continued that good work that was already done by Sergen, and it's just a very good team with I think a lot of quality to it, with a lot of very interesting players, experienced players, some younger players. It's a nice little mix. I enjoy watching Alanyaspor. Burak, your opinion on Erol's work so far with Alanya?
I think he's done well, like you've just pointed out, to continue the work of Sargon. They still play with pace, which is good to see. Papi Cisse is always going to score you goals as well. Sometimes his finishing is a little bit woeful. I think that's dependent on the day as well. Maybe whether he's had a good night's sleep or not. And I think they still Efecan Karaca as well, still one of the main men for them. He's got to find it a lot harder to get into the national team, I think, with all these youngsters around. But I think if he keeps performing like he is at Alanya, then I think he's a good addition to have into the team. And of course, like you say, they've got a good mix of experience in there, especially with Mr. Gülselam in the midfield. So, like I say, I think when you play them at home, they will be very tricky to navigate, because they're going to hit you on the break with lots of pace.
Yeah, what do you think, Umut? Were you surprised by how easily they dispose of Kasim Pasha, and are you surprised at all by Kasim Pasha's weakness, so to speak? They haven't looked too fresh early on this season.
Well, it's hard to actually play in Alanya based on how high the altitude that their stadium is. Their stadium is way high up, and it's really hard to perform down there. So I can understand the teams going as an away team to Alanya, as I went there before, and really hard to perform there. But moreover to that, I can say, as you said before, really good players on the bench as well. And I can say Salih Uçan being a good player on the bench, and seeing how Ozan Tufan did in the previous year, I can say he can make a good improvement down there in his journey in Alanyaspor as well.
Let's move over to our next game, because the next one, Burak, you missed your triumphant... I said I introduced you as your triumphant return, so to speak, because you, of course, missed the first episode of the season, in which Fenerbahçe won in an emphatic way, and Pat Cox, of course, joined us last week and did a tremendous job Thank you, Pat. But it was a shame not to have you on, because after suffering through what was Fenerbahce's worst season in history, and especially, I mean, for you, you're too young to have remembered the seasons that came close to this. So for you, definitely the worst season that you've seen in your life, I'm sure, especially the first 2/3 of the season. But then to come back now, last week, emphatic 5-0 win against Gazişehir. And then here, a huge win over Başakşehir in the Fatih Terim Stadium. 1-2 to Fenerbahce. And it was Enzo Crivelli, the new signing for Başakşehir, who I likened to Michael Frey a couple of weeks ago, scoring a beautiful goal in the 32nd minute. And so I take that back, Enzo. I think you're already better than Michael Frey ever was. But then Vedat Muric in the 77th minute pulled things level for Fenerbahce on a very nice Tolga Ziyerici assist. I didn't know he was still alive, but apparently he is. And then Nabil Dirar in the 4th minute of stoppage time heads it home on the tremendous Ferdi Kadıoğlu cross. 1-2 to Fenerbahce in stoppage time. A typical Ersun Yanal win, if you'll remember, in the 2013-14 season when Fenerbahce last won the title under Yanal. There were lots of these games where it was back and forth. Both teams could have scored on either end, and then in added time, Fenerbahce sneak in a winner, and it was a great goal, and Fenerbahce with a good win. And I thought they played a good game, although Edin Visca should always make it 2-0, and then, of course, this match is 95, 99% over. I think if Visca finishes that, but he had a tremendous opportunity, but Altay Bayındır with an amazing save. Absolutely astonishing how he managed to keep that out. Maybe it's down to Visca's finishing, maybe it's down to Altay. I'm going to let you guys decide. Burak, you first, please, because of course it's Fenerbahce.
We are fucking back, is what I say to that. It's like, when you win a game like that, in the manner you did that is like winning 2 to 3 games, and it gives the whole club a lift. The players, the management, the fans, the technic team, the dönerci on the street, the pub down the road, the people selling the little scarves on the streets around the areas of Kadıköy. It gives everyone a lift walking up. Like you say, Vedat Muric, what a guy. What a guy. I mean, eats his steak raw and scores his goals raw as well. That's 2 weeks, 2 strikes. Great pass by Tolga Ziyerici. We put him in an oxygen tent last season to recuperate, and it's done wonders for him because it hit a great ball, Emre-esque, and Vedat just struck out his long, Kosovan leg and smacked it past Smart. Got to give credit to Başakşehir. Their goal was absolutely class. It shouldn't have counted because the ball was moving when Mert kicked the pass to him. And as we know, I'm a man of the law, and that is against the rules. That should not have counted. The 2 goals that were given off for VAR, the first one for Başakşehir, correct call. The second one for Fener, correct call. They were offside. And the winning goal, masterstroke by Ersun Yanal, because it was all 3 substitutes were involved in that goal. The ball was won by Alper Potuk. It ended up getting to Miha Zayt, who dribbled like a sexy dribble for about 10-15 meters. And played it into Ferdi Kadıoğlu, who did a nice little pirouette before hitting that side of the foot pass into Nabil Dirar with his lovely big fat Moroccan forehead and smacked it into the goal. Absolutely amazing. Big shout out to Altay. Like you said, I think it was a combination of Visca just looking into the whites of Altay's eyes and shitting his pants and thinking, I can't score this. And the first one, he hits the post, and then Altay just stands up to him, just gives him the eyes, and just you can see Visca's soul just leave his body, and he just messes up the finish. So, of course, we hit the post. We hit the bar before as well. With Vedat Muric, great assist. But the thing I like about Vedat is he's not afraid to get stuck in and work, like do the dirty work, like run and chase men down and put in a shift every single game. I think we've not had a striker like him, like his position and his composure and his dominance on the field since the days of Højdonk and before that, even Kenneth Anderson. Nice, big target man, good with their feet. And the great thing about Vida is, unlike a Højdonk or an Anderson, he's still only 25 as well. Married, had a son in the summer as well, so he's family man, settled down, and he's just here to play football. But what I didn't like is that we put Ozan Tufan at right back, and you've got Murat Sağlam, the little tiger. I love him. I think he's going to be a great player. But, you win the match. I would have preferred to see Murat play at right back, and because Ozan's just come back into the team. He had a good game last week against Galatasaray, and then straight away he's been shunted onto the right. I think Faraday is going to be a star this season, hopefully, if he can get some time. So unfortunately, we have the injury to Moses, and Dennis Turkic started. Also, great shot just off the bar from him, which actually that led to the Başakşehir goal. The ball boy threw the ball into Marat. But I don't know, next week we got Trabzon, so I'm not sure what Ersin's going to do. Is he going to start Ferdi and drop Rodriguez, or drop Dennis Turkic? Because then, like you said, you have the battle of the wonder kids. You'll have Ferdi on one side and Abdülkadir Ömür on the other. But from a Fener fan, it's just great to see us play with some passion and some fun as well. It's good to see just good attacking football, and I'm really looking forward to the game against Trabzon next week, and hopefully a few more full signings, because I still worry for our defence as well because of the way that Jalson was just walked past for the goal from Başakşehir.
He also had some good
game,
moments though, where he really used his speed quite well, I think, and
he's got those good long legs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Positives and negatives with Charleston, of course, but Enzo Crivelli's finish was. Who could have?
But again, shouldn't have counted. Do we agree on that, gents? It shouldn't have counted. It was against the law.
I do think.
Ball was moving.
Ball was moving. By the way.
Go ahead. I'll let you speak now.
I do think that Altay made a mistake there. By the way, he should not have gone down like that. He should have closed this angle down. There's no reason for him to dive into Crivelli's feet there, and he's giving him the opportunity to stick it over him with the outside of his boot with a slight little lift. If he just stays up and goes down with his ass, basically, there's no way Crivelli gets that in. So it's he's
gonna learn from that, Kaan. You said that he listens to this podcast, I've been told. So he's gonna learn from this, and the next time he's in that position, he's gonna stand up, and just like he did with Visca, he's gonna look into the whites of their eyes. The opposition player is gonna shit themselves and fail to score.
Umut, what did you think of Edin Visca's wasted opportunity? He continues to be a little wasteful early on in the season. He had chances against Olympiacos, so did Robinho, of course. But that he should have always put away. Was it down to Visca's finish, or was it just a spectacular save from Altay?
Well, I think it was both, but it was also bad luck, which he was denied by the post as well. And sometimes it's just bad luck, because you need that luck to be with you. And Edin Visca, the main player after Emre's departure to Fenerbahçe, and all the responsibility was left to him in the team, and he really forces himself to do the right thing, but it's never just easy to do all those. And I can say Başakşehir started really well, and scoring that beautiful goal by Enzo Crivelli, which in fact was a brilliant goal for me, but
which shouldn't have counted.
I think the ball was
the ball was moving. It was indeed. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's debatable, but as Mert Günok played the quick goal kick directly into his path, Enzo Crivelli, Fenerbahçe defenders were nowhere to be seen. Where was Dirar? Where was Zanka? There was only Jailson to defend Crivelli during the goal, and he was also hesitant about tackling to him to avoid any penalty calls, as Crivelli already arrived to the penalty box, and the perfect finish from him from such a small angle. And after that, Fenerbahçe got into an attacking phase. And just before the goal of Enzo Crivelli, Deniz Türüç was also denied by the post, which was a bad luck for him as well. And I really rate him, unlike the many other authorities, I think. It's a pity that he won't be given chances to take the set pieces in Fenerbahçe. That was what he did during his time at Kayserispor. But in Fenerbahçe, there are the main players to take those, which are currently Emre for the free kicks and Kruse for the corner kicks. But I really hope he continues to impress for Fenerbahçe. And the other main player was, I think, Tolga Ciğerci, the player who made the first assist to Vedat Muric. Was a brilliant, because I wasn't expecting such quality pass from Tolga Ciğerci and such a clean assist from him. And I also actually used to his good play from his Galatasaray times, but however he was never consistent because his good performances were always interrupted by his long-term injuries during this season. And really those injuries forced him to start all over during the seasons. But I hope he continues to impress as well. And that's all.
So let's talk a little bit about those options for Fenerbahçe on the wings. We spoke about this earlier in the season. Gary Rodriguez. I know, Umut, you haven't been impressed with Gary. You said it last week. I don't think you were particularly impressed here either. Deniz, for me, had a little bit of a bland game. I wouldn't say he was particularly impressive. Of course, he did have that shot, but if you would have to pick, Burak, who would you omit, Deniz or Gary? If you'd pick it, if you want to put him fairly, obviously Ferdi's not a winger, but you don't necessarily have to play with a pure winger. Who would you sacrifice if it was up to you?
I would go Gary Rodriguez, just because I think Deniz and Ferdi, I think they've got that little bit of a mean streak to them in the way they play. Deniz, definitely, you can tell he likes to have a bit of a ruck and a fight, and I think Ferdi, just from his celebrations, you can see that he's got that spirit inside him. So I would go for those two. I'd drop Gary.
What about you, Umut? Do you agree with that? Obviously, you're a Deniz Türüç fan, so I assume it's a yes.
Well, I like Deniz Türüç more, but I really started to hate Gary Rodriguez after his time, his last times in Galatasaray, because he became way too predictable as he just continues to cut inside from the left and tries to shoot down there, but he was always denied by the defenders as they know what he will do every other time. Mm-hmm. So I think Fenerbahçe can use him as a counter-attack threat at occasions, but on the other times, I like Deniz Türüç much more of a playmaker kind of player to create more chances for them.
Yeah, and like Umut pointed out earlier, I think with Deniz, the thing is, of course, if you're not allowing him to take the set pieces, you're taking away some of his arsenal, of course, because he gets a lot of his assists from his crosses from corners and free kicks. So, but that's something, I mean, Emre 38, Max Kruse 32. Deniz could become the set piece taker in a couple of years. So if he can settle in, if he can establish himself, doesn't necessarily have to give 10-15 assists, because obviously I think people know and realize that he's not taking the set pieces, he's going to get less assists. But with his
I really think he's currently the best corner kick taker in the league right now, but he's not given any chance.
He had a really good season 2 years ago, I want to say, where his corners were absolutely brilliant and very consistent. But then he had a little bit of a drop off. So I think with any player, back in the day with Manuel Fernandes, he had periods where almost a corner was like half a penalty, and then he had periods where his corners weren't so good. So I think you have that with everyone, even with the biggest specialists. Sometimes they're just in a period where their corners are amazing. But then they, sometimes you just don't hit it right and you're in a little bit of a dip. And I think that's the same thing with a player like Diniz. And the same thing was true with Fernandes. I think those are two players that rely heavily on those set pieces to get them to buff their stats up a little bit. Not that that's not very important. Set pieces are a massive part of the modern game, so having a good set piece taker is important. But Fenerbahce have plenty to choose from. Any last remarks before we move on from either of you gentlemen on Fenerbahce's impressive start to the season?
Just a great big fuck you to Başakşehir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Umut, similar emotions?
I think Fenerbahce might found their striker at last, Vedat Muric, and I think Galatasaray made a big mistake not transferring him, and I think we're gonna regret it at last.
Yeah, if you don't get Radamel Falcao, which at the moment it doesn't really look too likely. Yeah. I mean, but you weren't too fond of the Vedat Muric move a couple weeks ago when it was still up in the air where he was going to end up. But he's convinced you, then I take it, in these... Because it's always a question mark when you see a player, especially strikers, moving from a mid-table team to one of the big sides. Because we've seen so often in the past, take for example, Diagne, Zafer Biriol, Serkan Aykut, Gökhan Ünal, who did okay at Trabzonspor but could never really break any eggshells at Fenerbahce. And there's been plenty of other examples of that.
Of course, Murat Hacıoğlu.
Burak Yılmaz, when he came from Trabzon to Galatasaray in 2012, I think, when he first came. It was a doubt whether he'll perform good or not, because everybody was too unsure, because he was the main player at the team when he was at Trabzonspor. But everybody was just doubtful about his performance in Galatasaray because he wasn't the main player down there.
Mm-hmm. True. But I think with the thing with Vedat Muric is like Burak has rightfully pointed out, he's more than just another big man who scores. He's an intelligent player. He has technique. I mean, he's obviously no Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but still he's got good feet and he likes to get stuck in, like Burak said. It's just a very good player who's gradually developed, started off in the second division with, I believe, Giresun, worked his way up. Then first season against Göztepe in the Super League, wasn't much of a goal scorer, but was a very good player still, a good team player. And I think that's where his success comes from too. Like, those goals ended up coming, but he became a good team player first before he became a goal scorer. And what you see with a lot of those Anatolian goal scorers from the past, like Zafer Birol and Okan Yilmaz, Serkan Aykut, well, maybe not Serkan so much, but you've seen Makukula, those guys, they really did on the pitch was score goals. They weren't necessarily more than that. They weren't so important for their team. And Vedat's such a hard worker. I think he really lifts this Fenerbahce up to a higher level right now. I don't think with a different striker, if you put, let's say, Roberto Soldado there, I think Fenerbahce are still kind of a half-baked team, which... because now they're still not perfect, because that back line is still... I mean, I think if Fenerbahce go into Europe with this team, especially, for example, the Champions League, they'd get slaughtered. But for Turkey, you don't need a great back line if your attack is that good. And so far, Fenerbahce's attack has looked impressive. Burak, any last thoughts or move on?
No, I'm sure the Fenerbahce fans listening have enjoyed that. I'm sure the other fans have probably thought, oh God, here we go. But, early, feet are firmly on the ground. Feet are firmly on the ground. I'm just happy to be watching my team play good football. That is positive. But I think, let's get on to the next games and see where that leads us, Mr. Kaan Bayazit.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. I do say it's early, of course, but... this is a big first test, and next week there's another one. Fenerbahce come through these 3 weeks. Let's say they beat Trabzon next week, which I think Trabzon, in everyone's eyes right now, is the big contender alongside Fenerbahce. It's super early, like we said, but let's say Fenerbahce come out with a win next week. I mean, that's 2 really difficult games in the bag already in that first half of the season. So, I mean, it's early, but if you can convince early on, that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't have to mean anything. Anyway, let's move on to our Sunday results. Rizespor playing the early game on Sunday against Sivasspor. So Sivasspor, of course, coming off that 3-0 win against Beşiktaş. Rizespor already had 3 points in the bag as well, and it's Rizespor here that get the 2-1 win over Sivasspor. Goals here coming from Brian Samudio in the 55th minute from a penalty kick, and then Fernando Boldrin doubled their lead 3 minutes later in the 58th minute against Sivasspor, and of course the new transfer for Rize coming from Kayseri. And then Sivasspor managed to pull one back, Fernando Andrade in the 79th minute, but they couldn't find an equalizer. A very sad news from this match as well. Rizespor striker Mustafa El Kabir broke his leg, and very unfortunate bunch of events for him. I mean, the team bus forgot to pick him up apparently at the training complex, so he had to take a cab to get to the stadium on time, and then he got there on time and then ends up breaking his leg. So Mustafa El Kabir, geçmiş olsun, get well soon. He'll be out for about 6 months, but you never know with these types of injuries. But let's hope he gets better. Umut, I'm going to throw to you first. Rizespor with their second win against a good team, Sivasspor, because I did think Sivasspor played a good game here. But those 2 quick succession goals kind of caught them off guard and ended up being enough for Rize to keep it 3 points at home.
Well, also my geçmiş olsun to Mustafa El Kabir as well. And I think it's the second time a broken leg happened in Rizespor Stadium, which was Emrah Baba last season, and it's the second time it happened. It's a really bad thing to hear as well. And seeing Rizespor acting as a compact team, the players know each other really well after playing a bunch of seasons together, and their back players, as we mentioned before in the earlier episodes, really improved their games and really eager to participate in the attacking phase of the game. So they made a quite well impression during the games and looked really well during the game.
What did you think, Burak, about Rizespor? How did they look? How did Sivasspor look? Were you surprised that Sivasspor, coming off of a 3-0 win over Beşiktaş, suddenly go down to Rizespor, who are Beşiktaş's opponent next week, by the way?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting Sivasspor to go down in that manner. Obviously, they beat Fenerbahçe in the pre-season game, and then they got the win last week. And maybe it's just something about Rize. Like I said, I think it's Ismail Kartal, isn't it? He's the new manager there now.
He is indeed.
They've lost, and obviously they've lost both Vedat and who's the other guy? Was it Artif as well? Wasn't it? He was at Rize, I believe.
Yeah, he went to Antalya, yeah.
As well. So they've lost, 2 of their firepower people.
They also lost Musa Charan.
Exactly. So I thought, okay, they've lost some personnel, but they still gave them a good game. I think the penalty, that's a Stonewall penalty. He tried to pull his bloody shorts off to go with, and there was a couple of other potential penalty shouts that came up in the game where the ball hit Sivas player, the Rize players. It hit them on the arm. But I think this new handball law is going to confuse a lot of people. But when the ball hit them, their arm was in a natural position, and it wasn't the arm moving towards the ball. It was the ball being played and hitting the arm. Now, I was under the impression that any ball that hits the arm is a penalty, but maybe that is any ball that hits an arm that is in an unnatural position is a penalty. So that might need some more clarification and looking into from us. But looking at the EFAB rules, it looks like that was a correct call. But there were some dubious ones that will potentially weren't given, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure. But it's a sport. I think again they're going to have a decent season. It's going to be hard to play against them at home. I just think they might struggle if they start to pick up some injuries and suspensions. So I don't think the people coming off the bench are as good quality as their starting 11.
Yeah, so far not showing any signs of being weakened too much by those departures. I mean, Vedat obviously a huge departure. I think Atif's departure, they replaced him pretty well with Fernando Boldrin, who's of course a quality player too. And yeah, Mustafa El Kabir now out injured. That's unfortunate for them, and that may have to do with some of the news we have later, because Rizespor are in the market for another striker. Let's move over to the next match though before we get to transfer stuff. We're not going to spoil anything yet. Trabzonspor beat Malatyaspor at home 2-1 following their 1-1 draw in week 1 against Kasımpaşa. Now they get the 3 points. Abdülkadir Ömür putting the hosts ahead in the 45th minute off of an incredibly well taken cross by Jose Sosa, who else the maestro of Trabzonspor. And then it was Joao Pereira in the 78th minute who made it 2-0 to Trabzonspor. A very neat little layback pass by, I don't remember exactly what it was. Was it Ömür or was it someone else? But Joao Pereira basically started up an attack, passed the ball into somebody on the right, and immediately received it back by a little back pass. And finished it well, 2-0. But then Eren Tuzlu made it interesting for a couple more minutes in the 89th minute, scoring for Yeni Malatyaspor. But ultimately, Trabzonspor managed to keep the 3 points at home and put themselves now on 4 points, 2 points away from the early leaders in the league, which of course include Fenerbahçe, Rizespor, and a couple of others. So Trabzonspor with an important win for them. A little disappointed probably last week not getting the win against Kasımpaşa. I think a team they probably should be beating. Those are 2 points that could potentially end up being expensive, because there's not a team that they want to be dropping points against right now, I think. But they get the job done here, of course, coming off of their European adventure in Athens as well. Burak, were you surprised by Trabzonspor's win?
Not at all. I think that, like I say, they'll probably be easily top 3 this season. The Trabzonspor, even though they have lost Yusuf Yazıcı, they still have an excellent front line, and they also still have Daniel Sturridge to come into that front line as well. So Abdülkadir Ömür, like I say, great header. He ate a falcon punch afterwards, but didn't seem to faze him. He got up and continued on with his game. Obviously interested in this because we play them next week in Istanbul. I did find, we've alluded to it earlier, their defence isn't the best, especially on set pieces, and that's where the Malatyaspor goal came from, was a set piece that wasn't defended. The ball wasn't rushed out to. I still don't know if they're using a zonal system or a man-to-man system, but I think Vedat will give their defence a lot of trouble in the air if we can get the ball crossed into him. So that is why also I'd like to see Ferdi and Dennis play, because you've seen that Ferdi can cross the ball, and hopefully Dennis can get his crossing boots on. But no, it wasn't a surprise for me to see them beat Malatyaspor. I think Malatyaspor may struggle this season, but I don't think they are going to be candidates for relegation, but I think they'll finish bottom half of the table. But I think as long as they can keep players like Mina fit, who was quite a rock, I think there was a potential penalty shout with him on Ekuban, and I think that was just a shoulder-to-shoulder, muscular moved up, as in not like Igazi match, which we'll talk about later, where it was pretty much a spear, like Edge or Goldberg. That's all the penalty given away. But no, rest up, Trabzon, and let's have it next weekend, sunshine.
Yeah, Umut, what did you think? Malatyaspor didn't look too bad to me. I think I expected them to struggle, but they got a win last week, of course, against Beşiktaş 3-0, and now they lose, but with their heads held high against what we think early on will be a title contender. Malatyaspor looking okay, I think. That those early European matches don't seem to have cost them yet. And as for Trabzonspor, they do what is expected of them. Any observations from you?
Well as Malatyaspor is a great team, it's not really as easy as it looks to play against Trabzonspor, because they are really a great team right now. They're in a great shape and they're playing really fast and eager to win in these games. And what I saw that Abdülkadir Ömür slowly becoming the main man after Yusuf Yazıcı's departure, and he is slowly showing brilliant performances, and I'm amazed every time I watch him. He's brilliant with his feet, really agile and quick on the ball, and as well as he's with the ball, he's also quite smart off the ball. We saw that his run to the back post in the goal, which is quite rare for a player of his height. He was at the right place at the right time, and a great delivery from Jose Sosa, which is his like trademark assists, which we saw in his previous years. It was a great goal from him, and he is really impressing currently. And second goal came from Pereira after his run into the box in the attack, which is an assist from Yusuf Sarı, and he's a new player as well, and showing really great performances early on.
Yeah, it was a really good assist. I mean, not you would think not too difficult, but it's he put it perfectly where it had to be, and I couldn't remember who it was, but now I do remember exactly, because last week you did say that he looked a little bit nervous, but I think here that was a very composed and very well thought out assist, and that's a great little get they got there. Another good Yusuf for Trabzonspor. I completely agree with you on Abdülkadir Ömür as well. Like before, when he was playing together with Yusuf, I was always more of a Yusuf fan. But you can see now that Ömür is playing more in a central role, and he has a little bit more freedom in where he can roam. Yeah, he's finally this is where he belongs. This guy is a real deal.
Yeah, he was like a second player when Yusuf Yazıcı was playing, but right now he's currently has the wheel with his hands, and really great to see him acting that way.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see him next week against Fenerbahçe, the big rivals. How is he going to stand up? Last year, of course, he had that really, really good assist on Yusuf Yazıcı in Kadıköy, that lofted little pass over the defense where Yusuf scored, but that pass was so sublime. So I'm really curious to see if he's going to stand up, because that's what's going to come down to next week. We know Fenerbahçe have a good attacking force already. We know Trabzonspor have a big attacking force. But with Trabzonspor, what it's always come down to, I think, at the big moments, they tend to choke a little bit. We saw it last year. I think they had a good chance for the title had they won on match day 18 against Başakşehir, and they completely choked there. I felt like, okay, the referee made some bad calls, but they also just seem to come up short themselves, and I'm very curious in seeing if this Trabzonspor now, they do have plenty of maturity in combination with that youthly enthusiasm and talent. It's going to be very important to see if Trabzonspor can cope with the environment of Kadıköy, with Fenerbahçe's form, a good Fenerbahçe, not like last season where they were playing a Fenerbahçe on the ropes. Now they're playing against a very capable and probably big rival for the title this season. So it's gonna be, I'm looking really forward to that match. It's gonna reveal a little bit, not everything of course, but for either side it's gonna show a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends in a draw. I think that would be a good result for both teams in the sense that it won't damage their morale. But obviously a win for either team would be huge and would give them a massive, massive boost heading into the international break. But Trabzonspor here get the job done, do what they have to do heading into next week's match in Kadıköy, and it's going to be finger-licking good, I think. Now, before we go over to the Galatasaray match, I want to end on that one on Sunday, so I'm going to quickly go to Antalya against Denizlispor first, because Denizlispor get their second win since their 9-year absence in the Super League. Of course, last week they beat Galatasaray, but now they did the same thing in Antalya, and they went and won 2-0. Same scoreline as last week, of course. Bahadir Öztürk scoring an own goal in the 37th minute, but that came off of an Aysati cross that got deflected. So credit to Aysati there. And then that was in the 37th minute, by the way. And then Madu Boro, who we spoke about last week as well, and he's made a good impression again here. 67th minute, it gets on the score sheet. And then we also had an Atif Sheshu missed penalty for the home team, for Antalyaspor. And the second week in a row that Adam Starkowiak saves a penalty. So maybe more credit to the Polish goalkeeper rather than discrediting Atif here. And Denizlispor, a little bit of a cheeky win, I'd say. I didn't really think they looked particularly impressive. But they get 3 points. Could be 3 golden points heading into the season. You never know how much they're going to struggle down the road. But they get off on an amazing start. 6 points. Umut, were you at all surprised by the Denizlispor continuing their winning ways early on? So, yeah.
Well, as we mentioned before, in the first week, Antalyaspor was also in a bad shape, but they really got away. Lucky goal from Diego, but this time they crashed because they were also similar to Göztepe and having some really hard time creating chances and. Having some really old players like Charles and Sardar Özkan, it's really hard to create chances and slow build up. And as for Denizlispor, they have a really good player, scorer, Hugo Rodallega, scoring chances, which is really important for them. But this time, it was a surprise that Barrow scored a Robben-esque goal from cutting from right to left, scoring to the top corner, and they were going on impressing everyone and making 2 out of 2.
Burak, that Barrow guy, he looks quality. Looks like a nice new revelation in the Super League. I'm not sure how old he is, but wouldn't be surprised to see him get picked up next summer or so by a bigger club. Looks good so far. And Denizlispor. Sorry?
26.
26. Okay. Maybe a little late for a big move then.
Maybe let's see how it goes this season. I mean, if we say that the first goal for Denizli was lucky because of the deflection, the second was the opposite, or like a howitzer of a strike that was. As I was listening to the commentary, it sounded like the Turkish commentator was going Vorol. Obviously, he was trying to say Boro in his accent, but I was like Vorol, Vorolan. It's like what a hit that was. But also the penalty that was saved by the Denizli keeper from Atif, his foot come off the line before Atif struck the ball as well, and that happened.
1 foot or 2, because both need to come off.
I believe. Oh, that's a good point, actually. No, I think for one of them, I think it was a Gaza Sheehan match, which we're going to get to later. Both feet were off the line. But it makes me wonder how often that rule is going to be actually enforced this season in the Super League. And
I think that's why they changed it, because I believe that's a change for this season as well. That 1 foot needs to remain on the line.
Yeah. And as for the penalty, then that against a Stonewall penalty that awarded. I think it just shows that Denizli are here to play, and I'm going to be interested in seeing how they get on in the rest of this first half of the season to see if they can keep up this form.
Yeah, and I kind of feel sorry for Beşiktaş lonely Sedat Şahinturk, because I was hoping he would get some minutes. He had 2 good seasons at Balıkesir in the second division, scored a decent amount of goals, had a good season. It's kind of like a younger version of Olcay Şahan maybe, but I believe Olcay signed with Denizlispor too last week or the week before, and Barrow is on great form. I don't know if Sedat's going to get a lot of minutes there. Denizlispor, 6 points, great start to the season, but sometimes you see that with newly promoted sides where they do get a really good start to the season, but then they kind of slow down and they do still get in trouble. So we'll have to wait and see. Jury's still out on the Denizlispor. Like Umut pointed out too, Antalyaspor thus far haven't looked too impressive, but a great start for Denizli, and Antalya, no problem for them. They already got a win last week, so let's move over to the main event on Sunday. That was Galatasaray hosting Konyaspor, and just like last season, this ended in a 1-1 draw. Last season, this match was completely engulfed in controversy, of course, due to the, or engulfed, I should say, by controversy due to the late penalty that Konyaspor got in that match. The late penalty that Konyaspor got in that match that should have never been a penalty. This season again, maybe not controversy. A lot of controversy after the match, maybe a little bit of a polemic created by, I believe, TRT when they were broadcasting the highlights of the match or started their program or whatever, where they said, ne yazık ki Galatasaray puan kaybetti or something, and Konyaspor took a little offense to that, but which is understandable. But this match ending 1-1, Galatasaray getting the scoring started here in the 60th minute through Ryan Babel, scoring on his debut at the Türk Telekom Arena for Galatasaray. Not, of course, his debut for Galatasaray, but at home. Scoring in the 60th minute, a deflection off of a defender that ended up beating Serkan Kirintele, who had just made a really big save right before that and looked like he was having a great game again. Then a red card for Jean-Michael Seri, the new signing, in the 74th minute, kind of turned the match around, because in the 6th minute of added time, Konyaspor got the equalizer through Jens Jonsson. Lots of things going wrong for Galatasaray. I think the main thing was they were having a decent game, creating chances, creating pressure. In the first half, there wasn't a lot of goal-scoring opportunities, but early on in the second half, Galatasaray came out looking on fire, had 3 really good opportunities before they ended up scoring. But then as soon as they did score, Umut, it kind of felt like they sat back even before they went down to 10 men. They didn't seem too interested in expanding their lead. What was going on with Galatasaray here?
Well, firstly, there's a lot to be said about Galatasaray's ridiculous gameplay against Konyaspor. I should say I was expecting Selçuk İnan to be Belhanda's replacement, as he was missing. And however, Fatih Terim preferred Feguli on that position before the game, which I believe was the first mistake in the game. Because watching the game, I have seen Feguli always next to the touchline on the right flank, even though he was listed as a right central midfielder on the team formation. He was never at the central position during the whole game he has played. That was one of the main reasons Galatasaray failed to be effective coming from the center to become a real threat for the position. Because as Feguli came to the right flank time and time again, Emre Mor, which I always question his game knowledge, because he didn't know where to go or where to stay, since Feguli really came to his position time and time again. And he also didn't expect this and invade his own space. And all of a sudden, Feguli, Mariano and Emre Mor all together on the right-hand side of the pitch, like a chaos on there, and Babel going inside of the box, and team formation on the field became really bad shape during the first half. And Nagatomo was left all alone on the left side, and all the last actions were left to him, and his lack of talent and creativity caused the attacks to die at the end and return empty-handed.
Yeah, and Konyaspor had a couple of opportunities. I believe they did come over that right wing for them, but Nagatomo's side early on in the first half, because we didn't see much of Konyaspor later on. But like you pointed out, Babel maybe leaving a little bit of a void there, but I do think Babel was probably one of the better players on the pitch. Emre Mor, what did you think about him, except for the fact that he didn't really know how to cope with Feguli invading his personal space, so to speak? What did you think of his performance here? Does he look like someone that should be starting over, for example, a Yunus Akgün, who is a highly touted talent?
Well, I think Emre should be should be waiting as a substitute for the next plan if Galatasaray take the upper hand in the game, because our bench isn't quite as quality as people think it is, and we should have the Emre Mor kind of players waiting there to make a decisive substitution in the occasions. And also Mbaye Diagne, the man, was really in a bad shape since the season started. Looks really weak during the aerial duels and the battles. And even though he's a tall and a strong guy, and he was a huge disappointment during the game as he failed to get into any kind of opportunity. However, I really think it was a mistake that Fatih Terim decided to take Cagney off during the final minutes of the game, where Selçuk İnan came in. This caused Konyaspor to strengthen their pressure around our box, and it occurred without Cagney. Galatasaray couldn't find anybody to hold the ball up in the front line.
There was no way to alleviate the pressure without a target man to...
kind of pressure, and at the end, the inevitable happened. The Konyaspor game goal came at the final minute from Jens Jonsson, and like a deflection from Ryan Donk happened.
And it's kind of ironic because that was kind of the image in the first half, I felt like, where Konyaspor were just booting it up the field without anyone to hold on to the ball. Yeah, Riyad Bajic was there, but he was being completely physically dominated by Louis Ndama anytime he came close. And that's kind of what you were saying here too, where in the last couple of minutes, instead of leaving Cagney on, to have someone there to contest for those high balls when you're booting it up the field, trying to keep Konyaspor at bay a little bit longer. And also ironic is that both goals came to be two lucky deflections. I think earlier we spoke about the deflection from Aysati's cross, but that's more like a forced error, I feel like. So I don't think I called it lucky. I think Burak called it lucky, but I didn't really feel like that was actually a lucky goal, because there you're forcing the defender to take action. It's kind of the same way, I guess you could say, here, but I think these are more like pinball deflections, where these were a lot luckier, I think, especially maybe the Jens Jonsson one, because that just perfectly falls in front of his feet in a perfect position. And at first I thought offside, but then of course in replay it was very clear that Nagatomo lifted the offside, so absolutely no chance of that. And at the end of the day, at least no controversy. Fatih Terim was very had a lot of praise for the referee after the match. Actually, I don't know if it was maybe a little bit backhanded. I didn't feel like it. It felt genuine. He said the referee had a good game. Although I think that red card for Siri, that was pretty obvious, shouldn't have needed VAR for that. Burak, what did you think of this match? The red card, was that the major turning point, or do you think that there were other issues?
I think Konyaspor should have had a penalty. I think we've seen the position slowed down. The ball comes into the box, hits Cagney on the wrist. The ball changes direction. And to me, that's a clear handball. It's a clear violation of the law. And as you know, I'm a man of the law, and that should have been a penalty to Konya. I think the two goals were both just very bitty, shitty goals. The Babel deflection, and like you just said, the Konyaspor, it just pinballed around and fell to John Johnson, who finished it well, to be fair, but the way it got to him was the famous Brazilian bobble that always happens when you're playing FIFA or ISS, and the ball just bobbles and bounces into the player's path. I just think Galatasaray looked a little bit lackluster. I'm not sure if this Falcao situation is affecting players on and off the pitch and their mentality, their ability to be able to concentrate. Kaan Cagney is flattered to deceive ever since he signed. He just doesn't look interested. I think Özer was alluding to it a lot with his body language. He doesn't seem to want it. So if you see a Vedat Muric, for example, he's running his bollocks off for the whole 90 minutes. He's looking to make something happen, and you can see in his eyes that he's hungry and he has a desire to play football. And Cagney is a little bit more relaxed. He does put in a little bit of running from time to time, but it's almost like a slow jog before he then decides where he's going to be taking his private jet to with his 4 wives. So I think Galatasaray have some problems, but there is still some time left in the transfer window for them to alleviate them. So we'll just have to wait and see what's going to happen. Is Falcao going to come? Is he not going to come? Where is Belhanda? Is he actually being operated on, or is there something else afoot? But I thought Konya were good for their point. I just Galatasaray really should have followed up and finished it off after the 1-0 But as you've both said, they just seem to take their foot off the gas a little bit for reasons I can't put my finger on. So it's not a great start to the season for them, but we are just 2 games in, and there's still time left in the transfer window. So watch this space.
Yeah, last season we had plenty of moments where we said they're out of it, and they ended up winning the title.
Exactly.
So let's never count out Fatih Terim's Galatasaray until they're mathematically out of it, or until it's actually clear. But anyway, yeah, no penalty or no penalty for me. That was not a penalty. I don't think it's clear because you don't see clear contact. There's something that appears like a deflection, but I've zoomed in on it really closely with my phone, watching it.
Yeah, but we know your eyesight. We know your eyesight is shit.
Yes, well, okay, but still, I don't think there's a clear deflection from his arm. I think there's something that appears like a deflection, but I think it's just the trajectory of the ball that just poorly timed there. And you also see he's got his arm next to his body, and when that. You do see that he's thinking of, oh, maybe I should, but then he pulls back, puts his arm behind his body. I mean, the rule is if the arm is in an unnatural position that if the arm is in a position that makes the body unnaturally bigger, I really don't think it applied here because the arm was next to his body. For me that was not a penalty because the contact wasn't clear to me. You just don't see a clear touch. I don't think it's a penalty. I'd love to say it was, obviously, but for me that's not a penalty. Umut, how do you feel about this position was talked about quite a lot, and mainly in social media. I felt like they didn't pay too much attention to it in the post-match programs, but
yeah, I think at the time I was in the stands, couldn't see what happened during the time, but then I saw the videos for the position, and which I could say Cagne had his hands tied behind his back, but he was moving around to move the ball with his body, which I think is a really clear penalty.
So you thought it was a penalty?
Yes, because at first I was thinking he was hiding his hands to avoid any contact, but he made a clear contact. And also, in addition, speaking of Falcao, in the game there wasn't a decisive opportunity which you can call that if Falcao was there, Galatasaray would have scored. Because the main problem Galatasaray had was they were unable to create any variety in their attacking play after Belhanda's absence on the pitch, which I can clearly say shows what kind of an important role he has on the build-up and chance creation, even though he is really underrated on the pitch.
Yeah, you highlighted that several times last year already. Belhanda is an important player for Galatasaray, whether people appreciate him or not. It becomes apparent every time he doesn't play. Once again highlighted here, I think, as well. Maybe another player in his position could do a better job, but Galatasaray don't have an alternative because Emre Agbaba is, of course, out for a long time still. So, yeah, Figuli played there, not his natural position, like you said, drifted out wide. John Michael Series, red card. Anything to say? Umut, you of course were in the stands. You didn't really see what happened. I sent you the video, I think.
I saw Jevtovic was on the ground at the time, really in pain. Then saw the video, which is a clear red card from me because at first the ref gave a yellow on the play, and then after the VAR review, he changed it to a direct red, which I think is gonna cost him 2 games in a row.
Yeah, minimum.
So Galatasaray will be having some issues on the midfield as well as the Cagne situation.
Okay, so I've been overruled to say yay, I say nay, but penalty according to these two gentlemen, and of course red card was correct. So it could have even been worse for Galatasaray. 1-1 in the end seems like a favorable result for Konyaspor, but you never know if they get a penalty, if they convert it, what happens. Galatasaray could struggle even more, even though I did feel like the goal was inevitable for Galatasaray, and like I said, I did also feel like they took the foot off the gas pedal after the goal. Maybe that if they would have equalized, obviously they would have had to push for a winning goal, because last week didn't end well, so they couldn't afford to lose points here. So I think then it would have been different. Could have been different. I'm not saying it would have been. But yeah, Galatasaray with a poor start to the season with just 1 point out of 2 games. They have still plenty of worries as well and work to do on the transfer market, and don't have all that much time left, because I do believe by this time next week the transfer window will be shut, so they have less than a week to go. I believe at Monday at midnight it's over on the 2nd, or is it until the 2nd of September? Does the second? I know it's until the 2nd, but does the 2nd of September still count, or does it end at 12 o'clock on the 2nd of December? I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think either of you are either. So let's move over to the final match of this match day. Gazişehir playing Gençlerbirliğ. This one ended in a 4-1 thrashing to Gençlerbirliğ. Gazişehir rebounding from their respective thrashing at the hands of Fenerbahçe last week. They get back with a win, the first ever win officially speaking in the Super League, of course. And it came to fruition due to a red card for Ahmet Oğuz in the 27th minute against Gençlerbirliğ, down to 10 men. And then it was Koyade who scored the opening goal in the 32nd minute. Then a second red card for Gençlerbirliğ for Pierre-Yves Poloma in the 39th minute. That also resulted in a penalty. Koyode stepping up for that penalty spot kick and converted in the 40th minute. Then Guray Vural made it 3-0 in the second half in the 56th minute. Berat Ayberk Özdemir managed to pull one back for Gençlerbirliğ in the 69th minute, but 3 minutes later Oğuz Ceylan put the final scoreline on the scoreboard, 4-1 to Gazişehir, and they get their first ever win, like I said, in the Super League, and scratch that nil off the board. Gençlerbirliğ now with 2 losses. Didn't look too bad last week, I felt like, against Antalya, I believe it was, but had that sloppy goal. But now 2 red cards. It's going to be difficult for them. Ahmet Oğuz is an important player for them. They already had a player suspended here because I got a red card last week, of course, too. So that's 3 red cards in 2 games. Maybe a little bit of a disciplinary issue. Burak, I know you looked into both red cards closely. What was your feeling on the first one? Was that a correct one, or was that a shoulder charge? And then the second one, which was also a penalty. How did you feel about that?
I thought the first one was a clear red card. It was a clear goal scoring opportunity. It was the shoulder charge body check that he took the guy down. I think he had no intention of playing the ball whatsoever. He clearly knew what he was doing against our player, and I thought the red card was the correct decision. The second one for the penalty, initially it was given as offside, wasn't it? I believe, and then they brought it back and said, hang on, the position was onside when it was played forward. And the way that the Gazişehir player was taken out by the Gençlerbirliğ player, it's almost like as if he had to run up. And I mentioned it was almost like a shoulder tackle that it's more akin to you'd see in a wrestling ring, like a shoulder tackle takedown. The guy flew on the floor, and it's a definite penalty. But as we know, that's not a red card. It's a yellow. You've given the penalty, so there's no further punishment needed. So the red card was incorrect.
Yeah, no, I think it's only with
the law.
Yeah, I looked at the
Is
law.
That right?
Yeah, I don't know. I looked at the revision of the law in 2016, which omitted accidental fouls from resulting in a red card. I don't know if there was another update to the rule that you have in front of you by any chance, but
not that I can see, and that was definitely not an accidental foul. He literally, it was like Hacksaw Jim Duggan back in the old days. Oh, he just like ran into him with no intention of playing the ball, but to actually just shoulder barge him over.
I wonder how many people. Sorry to interrupt, but I wonder how many people get these corny ass American wrestling references we make sometimes. Well, you make, and I.
Yeah.
I just pour oil on the fire.
Indeed, if you get them, do let us know. We try not to make them too often, but in this case, it's a perfect example of that exactly what's happening. No intention to play the ball, not accidental. So, but it shouldn't be a red card because that's the law, which I think is stupid. Anyway, I think what's the point in?
No, but it should because the law is if it's an accidental fall, it should be a yellow. But if it's an intentional fall, it's still a red.
That is it. Then obviously,
that's how I read it earlier. I looked it up just to be sure, but
But maybe next week we'll have to retract it. Who knows?
Exactly. Then if you can correct us, send us a proper source for your correction, and we will rectify it next week.
Do.
And if you find any other errors, feel free. And if it's noteworthy enough, we will mention it next week. And if it's not, well, then you're just an ant. You know what?
Exactly.
Umut, disciplinary issues for Gençlerbirliğ, 3 red cards in 2 weeks. Not looking good for them in that regard. Football quality wise, they don't seem to be too bad, but those red cards are going to keep costing them. They need to fix that.
Well, I don't actually think it's a disciplinary issue because there's some kind of awkward situations where you cannot avoid, which I believe was happened to Galatasaray in 2 weeks as well. We have received 2 red cards in 2 games in a row, similar to that. And the offside call in the second red card, which was taken away, was almost the same as what happened in the Başakşehir Fenerbahçe game. At the VAR review, they were looking at if there was a second contact after the ball was played to the receiver, and after they made sure there was no contact, they reverted the call and gave the penalty and the red card. Playing with 9 players on the majority of the game is a really frustrating and hard to play, and Gençlerbirliği couldn't help but losing the game 4-1.
Yeah, let's end on that note for Gençlerbirliği, the final match of the second match day. So an emphatic win for Gazici here, big win for them. Gençlerbirliği's second defeat in a row. That'll do it for match day 2. Let's do some gossip. Let's talk about some transfers. Not necessarily a gossip straight away, because we will start with some official stuff. Ricardo Quaresma has been requested to leave Besiktas to find himself a new club. He got 8 days to do so. In the meantime, that has already been reduced to 6 days or so. So Ricardo Quaresma asked to leave and find himself a new club. If he does not, he will have to train at Fulya for the remainder of the season, train with the youth team or something, can't train with the A team. So they're basically trying to force him out of the door. Long servant of the club, but it has become painfully apparent that his level is just not where it needs to be anymore. And some rumors, Başakşehir supposedly interested, Kasımpaşa supposedly interested, but nothing concrete so far. Looks like Quaresma will either be joining another club or he will not feature this season in a competitive match. Understandable decision by Beşiktaş, or is it a little late in the window, you guys feel?
I think maybe, I think you've got George Nkundu, who can operate on the wing. I think it's good for Beşiktaş to get rid of him. I know you haven't been a fan for a while now, and I think it's just going to be good to get him out and have a new lease of life into the team, whoever that might be. Maybe a little bit too late to get a replacement, but you never know. Beşiktaş have been making some good under the radar signings lately.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily
the man in charge.
Sorry, you cut out, and I thought you stopped talking.
No.
See, and that's why I interrupt you sometimes, because then you cut out, and I'm like, oh, he's done, and I'm like, oh, you're not.
No, man, you just got rubbish into.
No,
in
but
Belgium.
but that's not actually what it's not actually what I was really meaning to say. Is too late for Besiktas? I think it's more like, is it too late for Quaresma? Obviously, I think Besiktas early on, and at the end of the last season, it was kind of like, well, you know what, we don't really want to continue with him. He can look for a new club, but he insisted on trying to convince Avci. He wanted to take his chance, and in my opinion, he got his chance. He played in almost every friendly in the training camp, and he played in the opening match day, and the result was the same. I think he was poor in the friendly matches. He was poor in the first match day against... he wasn't the only one, of course, against Sivasspor, but yeah, I think he got what he wanted, which was a chance, because one of the big criticisms that has come is that, well, Besiktas should have done this 2 months ago. But actually they did. And Quaresma, wanted his opportunity to fight for a spot in the team. And at the end of the day, he's a big earner at the club. Besiktas want to cut expenses, want to cut the wages. It's an understandable decision on their part. Maybe the way they went about it, I didn't think it was particularly tasteful that news got broken like a day or two before Quaresma was actually asked to find himself a new club, or officially he announced it 2 days later. I think Serjan Dikme of Beyaz TV announced it like a day or two earlier, and Quaresma took a screen capture of his tweet and said this is fake news. 2 days later it turned out not to be. It's a little bit unfortunate that a journalist finds this out before the player actually does, if that was how it happened. Maybe Quaresma already knew but was still in denial. I don't know, but it seems a little meh. Umut, what do you think is logical for Besiktas, who are clearly trying in a position where they're cutting ties with a lot of the old guard and moving on with a new generation?
Yeah, it's definitely logical, because you need to get rid of old players. Because you'll fall back playing with those players, and you need eager players like Nkudu and Tyler Boyd, who really has lot to prove, lot to show, and playing with those kind of players, you have more chances and possibilities to win more games.
And talking on that note about older players, Gary Medel of Besiktas is officially moving on from the club. He has not yet been announced actually by Bologna, so it's not 100% official yet, but he did say goodbye to his teammates this morning in training, and he is off to Italy. He is joining Serie A side Bologna on a €1.5 million transfer fee. Besiktas will receive 1.25 million and an additional 250,000 in bonuses, is what's being reported by Ortak Çizgi, who is the most reliable source when it comes to Besiktas. Gary Medel, big earner as well, 2.3 million a year, one of the biggest earners in the team. 32 years old, not really fitting the role as a defensive midfielder that Avci wants to play with. The type of defensive midfielder, he's an ankle biter. He's not somebody who can build up the game, and that's what Avci wants. So he didn't fit into that role. I thought he was a very serviceable backup central defender. I always think he does a really good job at that position. He's a good central defender. Unfortunately, he lacks height, and that's the same conclusion they came to at Inter, where he was always underwhelming for them at the defensive midfielder, because obviously for a big club who are expected to dominate the game, they expect more from a defensive midfielder, whereas Medel, the role that he had at Chile was always that of somebody chasing down the ball and being a little bit of an ankle biter, not somebody who's being relied on for the build-up. But when you're playing for a Besiktas and Inter Milan, Fenerbahçe, Galatasaray, Trabzonspor, as a defensive midfielder, you're also expected to do more than just try and capture the ball, run after your opponent, but you're also expected to play forward passes and to assist in the build-up play, the transition from defense to attack. It's something that Medel just isn't that good at, so it's also why at Inter they prefer him as central defender. I think a team like Bologna is more suitable for him. I think he can still do a good job there as a central defensive midfielder, or wherever they decide to use him. He's a utility player, good footballer, but his time at Besiktas was also... this was time to move on, I think, although he still has plenty to offer for sure, still is Chile's captain and all. So Besiktas get some money for him, offload the big wage, a player who's in the final year of his contract. Any of you have anything to add to that? I think it's pretty,
No. Bye, Gary.
Bye, Gary, indeed, and thank you for everything as a Beşiktaş fan. The next news item, Adil Rami has signed for Fenerbahçe on a 1+1 year deal. He will be earning 2 million a year, so if he decides to extend, or if Fenerbahçe decide to extend rather, he is coming from Olympique de Marseille, where he basically got shown the door a couple of months ago after a little bit of controversy where he claimed to be injured and then went on to a French TV show to mud wrestle or something. I don't think if you're injured you can actually do any physical activities on TV. So at first I thought it was just a talk show, and then I'm like, yeah, okay, you can talk when you're injured. That shouldn't be an issue. But apparently he was on French TV to mud wrestle. So Marseille didn't take too kindly to that, cut him from the team, and then dissolved this contract at the end of the season. Fenerbahçe signed him now on a freebie. Of course, a World Cup win with France, was part of the team, didn't play a single minute, but was there, and was apparently an important player in the dressing room for the atmosphere, so that's a positive, I guess. He also has a lot of negative connotations associated, a lot of negativity associated with his name, of course, and due to his relationship or ex-relationship with Pamela Anderson, where supposedly he beat her and stuff like that, but that has nothing to do with football. Let's talk about the football. Adil Rami, Burak, first you. Good signing for Fenerbahçe. What do you think?
Good signing, a good character. League winner with Lille, Europa League winner with Seville. Like you say, squad member of the World Cup winning French team. Didn't play a single minute in the tournament, but the guy is a winner. He's won trophies at national team level, European level, and club level. He's still a very good defender on his day. How many of those days will he have at Fenerbahçe? I cannot tell you. Only time will tell. But he is a great technical player on the ball when starting the game, which is also very important for a defender, as we know, bringing it out from the back. And the guy's proven quality. Last season, he was in a bit of a bad place. So we'll see if the move to Istanbul freshens him up and reignites his love for playing football. He's Moroccan French, so he's got a fellow French speaker in the team in Diraz. So hopefully that will help him to settle in. And he's got he's coming into a team which has got a lot of positive energy right now. So that could rub off onto him, and if it could reignite him to recapture some of that form he showed in Euro 2016 and in those the Europa League winning season for Seville, and whilst he was at Marseille as well, he will always pop up with a goal or two for you as well. And I think the character is going to be very good for Ferrer. And he was free, and he's not a massive earner either. So free transfer. There's been no signing fee, I believe. 2 million a year, reasonable salary with the option to extend. Should things go well, potentially could extend it. But looking forward to seeing him play. He's got a great beard and moustache as well. So I'm happy. I'm happy with Adil Rami.
A porn stash. Umut, a good signing for Fenerbahçe. What do you think?
Well, I know him from his Valencia times, which was his good days, and he was a partner actually in the defense with Victor Ruiz at the time, which is a good trivial thing to know. And I think he will do good for Fenerbahçe, which I believe is in a dire need of central defensive player, because right now they are covering out with Jailson right now, and which is a risky thing to do, and I hope he does well.
I spoke to French connoisseurs, French football connoisseurs, Jonathan Johnson, who you may know from ESPN. He covers Paris Saint-Germain. He seems to think that Adil Rami is past it, had his best days, not really, didn't really think that his mind is still on football, I'd say. And very similar what I heard from Mohamed Ali, who covers Marseille, so he knows. He watched them up close. Said, well, over the hill, past his best days, and not necessarily the best of signings. But we'll have to wait and see. Maybe if he is motivated, and you know what, like Burak says. Good team spirit already. The morale is high right now. He comes in a team that's going well. It could have a decent effect on him. Of course, Marseille is a chaotic club, so it's sometimes it can be difficult, and it's not always easy to say. But two experts, not too high on this. They did say, well, I did say Isaac Johnson, by the way, on one of Fenerbahce's big targets, Luis Gustavo, who's also 32. Still very much a good player, he said, and that could be a really good signing for Fenerbahce, and end up getting him. So I did ask around a little bit, but let's stick with Fenerbahce, because there's another news item that seems to recur every transfer window. Burak jokingly said off air, Hatem Ben Arfa being linked again to Fenerbahce right now, according to the Gazzetta dello Sport. And something I said in our group chat is that I always find it funny when these Italians start talking about non-Italy related transfers, and they always seem to get it wrong. But Hatem Ben Arfa supposedly on the radar of Fenerbahce for a 3-year contract worth $2.5 million a year. He's already 32 years old, so that I can't really imagine that Fenerbahce would make that mistake when they have a wonder kid, like we say, Ferdi Kadiolu, in the pipeline, knocking on the door in that same position. I don't think Hatem Ben Arfa would be a good signing. I don't think it's a necessary signing. I'm not saying that he's a bad player. Obviously, he had a good season at Rennes, but Burak, what do you think? Just media gossip, or do you think there's some truth to it?
I would like to think it is media gossip, but Ben Arfa, he's another bit of a psycho, isn't he? And we seem to be building a team of them. So if he comes, if he can get him for maybe like a 1+1 deal, like we have done with Rami, maybe around 1.52 million. If we could afford him, I would say why not? Why not? Let's just bring him in and see what he can do, see where he can play. If you're categorically asking me yes or no, I think it would be a no. But if he does come, I'm not going to be cussing him out. I'm going to be supporting him fully. But right at this moment in time, I think another left back and a central defensive midfielder is more what we need. And obviously there's still rumours of Luis Gustavo and every single left back that you can possibly imagine that we're linked with. So
yeah, the Italian media are talking linking Riza Durmisi again to move to Fenerbahce. He was of course previously linked with Besiktas too. But that's another one of those moves he'll cost money. I know Lazio are not willing to let him go cheap, like 4 or 5 million, and Fenerbahce is simply not going to pay that, because I think they want to keep the bulk of their money from their Elif Elmas money. They want to keep that for I think Luis Gustavo. They still have 6.5 million left.
Yep.
I think they'll probably be wanting to spend at least 4.5 of that on a central defensive midfielder, and then maybe see what's left. So interesting week still. Definitely Fenerbahce. There will be some activity there, and I'm sure there'll be something to talk about next week when it comes to Fenerbahce.
Watch this space. It's not going to be boring, that's for sure.
Yeah, indeed. And some news that's coming in right now as well. Manuel Fernandes supposedly agreed a 1+1 year deal with Besiktas, but always credible and reliable source Murat Özcan of Orta Çizgi says as of right now there is no deal. Supposedly Manuel Fernandes isn't just in talks with Besiktas, he's in talks with Gazişehir and even with Galatasaray. And according to Murat earlier, the only club that have made a concrete offer is Gazişehir. They offered him a 2 million contract. Fernandes is supposedly looking to get at least a 2+1 year deal. out of it. He, of course, has got his transfer rights in his own hands after leaving Lokomotiv Moscow like a month ago or so. So Manuel Fernandes on the radar for Besiktas potentially, for Gazişehir and for Galatasaray. And you know what? Actually, I think Manuel Fernandes would be a good get for Galatasaray despite his age of 33. He had some great seasons in Russia, the last 3 especially. I think when he played Galatasaray last season in the Champions League, he had real moments where it was really impressive. Still a really good footballer, of course. Would I want him back at Besiktas personally? I wouldn't, for those conditions that are being reported, which is 1 + 1 years for 1.1 million a year, I would not say no to it, as long as it doesn't come at the expense of a proper number 6, which we'll talk about in a second. Umut, would you take him at Galatasaray right now, Manuel Fernandes?
Well, he conflicts with the idea of how I say in the previously old players need to be get rid of. So right now we are in a need of a central player, as who knows when Belhanda comes. So right now he could be a good option for Galatasaray, but in the future he may have some issues about the wages and etc.
Yeah, and it's like we always say with financial fair play. I've said it before. I'm a proponent of financial fair play, but there are very clear negatives on financial fair play. Not so much that they're limiting clubs, that they're making clubs watch their spendings, and that they're preventing, or at least should be preventing, people, board members from throwing money and clubs just buying at will for stuff they really can't afford, but more so the fact that they're kind of forcing clubs like Fenerbahçe, Galatasaray, Beşiktaş in the past, not now, but because they're not under financial fair play anymore, but they're forcing these clubs to go for older players who are free because they can't pay a transfer fee, but they can pay a signing bonus, which is completely counterintuitive. I think if you can't pay a transfer fee, you shouldn't be able to pay a transfer a signing bonus either, because it's essentially the same thing. But what you see with that is that we see guys like, for example, Adil Rami becomes very interesting for Fenerbahçe because he's a free agent. They don't have to sell before they can buy him, and that's the problem there. Where also we're seeing with Galatasaray, their signings this summer is lots of 30-plus-year-old players who are on a free, because a 25-year-old player, a good quality 25-year-old player, is not going to be out of contract. That rarely happens. Usually when you've got decent quality players that are out of contract are guys who are 30 or approaching 30, who are looking for one last big contract, and that's usually one of the issues that you see with financial fair play, that basically these clubs are getting forced to go for older free agents, because younger free agents usually aren't that good, because they wouldn't be a free agent if they were. So yeah, that's the thing with Manuel Fernandes, that's the thing with, for example, Ryan Babel, and I agree with what Umut says, that we should be going for younger players, but as long as you're under financial fair play, it's just simply difficult. Gazişehir is apparently an option for him. They seem to have offered 2 million a year. I don't know, how can a club like Gazişehir offer that? Remember Eskişehir offering those types of contracts, had Ruud Boffin at 1.8, Erkan Zengin at 1.8, really high wages for those types of clubs, and we see where Eskişehir are right now. I don't think a club like Gazişehir should be doing that. If you look what happened to Gaziantepspor, that's just history repeating itself, I guess. But yeah, it will be interesting to see Manuel Fernandes come back. He's still a great football player. Obviously, like Umut says, he's getting older, so he's a short-term fix. But that's what you get in financial fair play, is that you've got a lot of short-term fixes and not a lot of moves for the future. So let's talk about a potential move for the future. Besiktas are looking for number 6. Gary Medel is out, and Thiago Maia seems to be his replacement. An agreement has been reached with his club Lille for a loan initially, with a potential option to buy. The player has also agreed terms, but nothing is confirmed officially yet. So this is, maybe when you listen to it, it is official, but this can still not happen, of course. But Thiago Maia, once very highly rated young Brazilian international, moved to Lille, I think 2 or 3 seasons ago when he was 18, 19 years old. He's now 22, didn't exactly have the impact that they were expecting at Lille, but he is going to have an opportunity to revitalize his career in Turkey, something we've seen many foreigners do, and that could be an interesting move for Beşiktaş. Umut, are you familiar with Thiago Maia?
Well, I only know him from League One's summaries and etc. So I only know him as a defensive midfielder who lacks some attacking kind of attributes, just like Medel, but a lot younger, and which is a great opportunity to show himself in the big arena of Super League, and some opportunities to show himself after Atiba's old age.
Yeah, but I think there's still a difference between Medel and Atiba, for example. I think Atiba's contribution offensively isn't necessarily felt that much either, but he's a very important conduit, connecting that defense to attack. But Medel is really just a player that focuses on the defensive aspect of the game. I don't know, Burak, if you're familiar with Thiago Maia or maybe his reputation, but a 22-year-old player with potential. Beşiktaş are making a lot of those types of moves. Players in their mid-20s, they are building a team for the future. Maia, a potential part of that. Would it be a good move, you think?
He's not someone I've seen play a lot, to be fair with you, but he looks like he's got the build and tenacity to do well in Beşiktaş and for the Turkish League. So hopefully we get to, I'm not sure if it's going to be too early for him to start this weekend, but we'll have to keep a close eye on him in training to see what the reports are like coming out. I don't know how much first-team football he played last season, but the fact that he's able to come to Beşiktaş shows me that he's maybe not someone they look at as a first-teamer right now, and they're quite happy for him to go off and get some football. But like I say, he's one of these Brazilians, and they're always going to have that little bit of flair around them as well. So let's wait to see him get a few games in the first 11, and then we can see what he's really about.
And another Brazilian with plenty of flair around him that has been linked with Beşiktaş in recent days, and has also been mentioned with Fenerbahçe actually, is Fabinho Alcantara, the brother of Thiago Alcantara of Bayern Munich, of course. But Fabinho, academy product of Barcelona, or at least played for Barcelona's youth level. Last season, or 2 seasons ago, was on loan, I believe, at Inter. Has had loan spells here and there. Very talented young player, 26 years old, but has had 3 major knee injuries already, which is a lot for a player of that age. Currently, he's getting match fitness with Barcelona, playing in the first team. Played, I believe, 82 minutes this past weekend, and then played 50-something the week before. So very interesting to see how Barcelona do that, just have a player that is on the way out, pick up minutes. So whether it's going to Beşiktaş, whether it's going to Valencia, who he's linked with too, but it looks like Fabinho is on his way out on a loan at Barcelona. Beşiktaş is a possibility. His agent was attending the match on Friday against Göztepe, had talks with Beşiktaş officials. Beşiktaş have also now, since those talks, have made a move officially, have put in an offer at Barcelona, and now it's a waiting game now. Apparently, they're expecting to have some clarity by Friday on that front. Umut, I know you're a fan, I believe, of Fabinho. Would that be a move that you would be envious of?
Correction, you're calling him Fabinho, but he's Rafinha.
Oh, why am I calling him Fabinho?
Yeah, I know you're getting tired, but
Rafinha, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
May have to, yeah. Rafinha. Thank you, Umut. Yeah, Rafinha Alcantara. Yeah.
He's a great player, and he's playing as a central midfielder, and he's actually quite good on both sides of the pitch. Both defensively and attacking phases of the game, and quite talented on his passing game, and has some great shots under his talents. Also, he can be a great addition to a squad who is gonna take him, if Fenerbahçe or Beşiktaş, I don't know who. I think he will be a great addition.
Yeah, of course it remains to be seen because he does have opportunities to go, like I said, to Valencia, for example. But he's a very versatile player, like Umut pointed out. He can play as an 8, he can play as a 10, he can play on the left wing, he can play on the right wing, he can even play as a 6 in a pinch. It's a very versatile player. I think it's the type that any team would love to have, except for apparently Barcelona, who seem to have enough quality as it is, and they don't seem to need him, because he is one of those players that goes out on loan a lot. Rafinha possibly going to Besiktas will, they like this, like Beşiktaş fans like to say mockingly a little bit of Fikret Orman haftaya netleşir. Well, in this term that's going to be clear because it will be clear next week. In a week time, we will know what's happening in all the transfer news. So let's move on quickly because of course there is this ongoing saga of Radamel Falcao. Still nothing has come of it, and I think the closer we get to the ending of the window, the less likely it becomes that Falcao is going to come, because we've spoken about this before. Galatasaray have financial fair play to worry about, so if they have to pay a transfer fee, which Monaco are insisting on, they will have to find that money elsewhere, and they will have to close that, otherwise they can't register Falcao or Luyendama for the Champions League. So obviously they don't want that, because it's a big goal for Galatasaray this season to make a good impression in that Champions League. So if they get Falcao, they want to play him. So they have to be quick about it, because I don't think that's a move they can still really do on deadline day, otherwise they're pretty in a very tight position, because then they have to find money elsewhere to sell or whatever. And one of the things that have come up that Umut pointed out earlier, Mevlüt Erinç is being named as a potential alternative to Falcao. It's a big drop off to go from Falcao to Erinç, but Umut, what's the news on that?
Well, it's rumored that Galatasaray is going to have a deal with Mevlüt Erinç. Is a one and an optional 1-year contract with him due to his age, and I don't think he's literally the alternative to Falcao, but he's gonna be the player on the bench, and who is a Turkish player to be as an alternative because of the yabancı kuralı rule. So you have to keep some native players on your bench and to be considered as an alternative on your squad. So I think they are going to on negotiations with Mevlüt Erinç in that kind of way.
Yeah, I think he's a guy they can use either way, whether they get Falcao or not, because obviously right now I think they only have one pure striker, not counting Adem Büyük, not counting Ryan Babel, who can both play as a striker, of course, but aren't pure strikers. So Galatasaray can, of course, use some depth in that position, even if Falcao wouldn't come. Then I'm just going to quickly rapid fire go over some of the other news we have. Manuel Adebayor, who had an expiring contract at Başakşehir, has signed with Kayserispor. So Kayserispor adding another guy in his mid-30s to their striking force. They, of course, already have Umut Bulut at 35, I think. And then they have Adebayor now at 35. And I think they still have Asamoah Gyan, who is like 34 too. So they have a pretty old strike force right now. Then something we already alluded to in last week's episode, but Mert Çetin has officially signed with AS Roma. I believe the transfer fee involved here was 2.5 million, and he comes from Göztepe, of course, so a central defender, another central defender in Europe now, another Turkish central defender, of course, with Çağlar Soyuncu doing well, with Ozan Kabak doing well, and of course with our Meri Demiral doing well. We have quite a few central defenders in the European top 5 leagues right now. Hopefully Mert will get some playing time at Roma and prove himself. Then another transfer news, Ertaç Özbir former goalkeeper of Malatyaspor, has signed a 2-year contract with Göztepe. Ertuğrul Ersoy has joined former teammate Umut Meraş at Le Havre in the French Ligue 2. He joins them from Bursaspor on a €750,000 transfer fee. I know he was linked with Galatasaray too for the same fee, but I think at the end of the day Galatasaray didn't feel like they wanted to pay a $750,000 fee, which they then would have to find elsewhere to break even on. And then finally Seydou Doumbia, we alluded to it earlier, Çaykur Rizespor, with the injury of Mustafa El Kabir, looking to add another striker to their team. Seydou Doumbia is currently being They're currently in negotiations with Seyda Doumbia. That's a name, of course, we've heard a lot over the years, linked with Fenerbahçe, Beşiktaş too. I'm not sure if Galatasaray were linked with him at one point. Probably they were. But he's been linked with the top teams in Turkey for a long time. And he may end up in Rize now. Okay, so on Thursday, the Europa League, we already talked about that earlier. Trabzonspor will be hosting AEK Athens at the Akiasi Stadium. In the Super League on matchday 3 on Friday, Kasımpaşa will be hosting Ankaragücü and Kayserispor will be hosting Galatasaray. On Saturday, Konyaspor host Antalyaspor, Göztepe host Denizlispor, and Beşiktaş host Çaykur Rizespor. On Sunday then we have Gençlerbirliği hosting Başakşehir, Sivasspor hosting Gazişehir, Fenerbahçe hosting Trabzonspor, and Malatyaspor hosting Alanyaspor. No Monday matches, of course, because we're heading into the international break. The big match of matchday 3 is without a doubt Fenerbahçe Trabzonspor, which will be very important going into the title race. We'll have some indications for sure. But we spoke about that already, so I think we're good to go. This is a pretty lengthy episode of Football Ala Turca, and we'll be back next week with matchday 3 results. Of course, the Europa League draw. Briefly, we'll cover the Europa League and Champions League group stage draw, hopefully with a positive result, with Trabzonspor being in that draw. And then we will also be recording an individual episode on the opponents of our Turkish teams. You will get all of that. But for this week, I want to thank you all for listening to Football Ala Turca. Burak, thank you very much for coming on. And of course, Umut, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you for making it through this 2-hour episode. So a lot of talking was done, obviously. It's good to be back with Kaan and Umut. Azad has completely buoyed us off. I think he said he had to go out to lunch to try some of this famous Chicago deep dish pizza. So I hope it was worth it, Azad. And I hope you kind of choke on it, but you survive. You just get it down your nice crisp white shirt, and you have to walk around with a dirty shirt all day at work. But I hope to get you back on a podcast soon. And again, you can get to us on Reddit, Twitter. I don't think we're on any other social channels yet, but we might be. Let us know what you thought of the pod, what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to hear and see in the future. And thank you for allowing us into your ears as well.
And if you would like to support the podcast, please head over to patreon.com/Falt, F-A-L-T, and you can become one of our official patrons, an official Turkaholic if you pledge $3 a month, or an official Turkamaniac if you pledge $10 a month. Go ahead and do that. And obviously, if you have a business and you want to advertise, you can always get in touch with us as well through these channels, and we can include an advertisement for your business on our show, which we are very open to. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.